Hello. In this video, this probably very long video, we're going to look at the films of Paul Thomas Anderson? No, Wes Anderson. No, wait. Paul W.S. Anderson. I believe his middle name was William Scott. I had to look that up recently. Because obviously, yeah, William Scott Anderson. The question, yes, you might be asking, you might not have ever known this unless you look on IMDb. Because the number one trivia thing about him is why his name is Paul W.S. Anderson. It's because he was sick and tired of having to explain the significance of the raining frogs in Magnolia from 1999. He added the initials W.S. to his name to avoid confusion with the indie filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson. Unfortunately, the modified name is too similar to another celebrated auteur, Wes Anderson, and Paul is constantly fielding questions about what it's like to work with Bill Murray. There you go. Oh my god. So, look, I have the majority of his films. The only ones I don't have is Shopping, which I had to find a 360p edit on YouTube. Someone had done an AI upscale, which looked like shit, so I watched the 360p version. Soldier I rented on Apple TV Plus for like $3, which I was fine with, because the DVD is available, but the Blu-ray is out of print, and I'd like to get the Blu-ray because it has a commentary track, because he actually really liked physical media. Almost every single film he's worked on, he has at least a commentary, which is amazing. Like, it usually with Jeremy Bolt, he's producing partner who's produced every single one of his films, and it's kind of insane that he's just on every single release, which is great. Like, that's wonderful. You know, as someone who loves physical media, that's cool. I like commentary tracks. I like it when a director actually supports the physical media to that degree, even in the modern age. Like something like Monster Hunter I believe still has a commentary track. What were the other ones? I watched his TV movie, The Sight, which I also found a 480p version on YouTube. It was okay, so we're going to dive into that as well. And his latest film, In the Lost Lands, I watched in the cinema for $10, which was great. No one else was there. It was just me. It got to the stage that someone came in about 40 minutes in to check that I was still there, and I was, so they just went back to their business. That's a cinema habit. If you work at a cinema, you might know this. I don't. I had to ask a friend. Turns out they actually will check 40 minutes into the screening if anyone's there. If they're not, they'll turn the projector off to save power. So we have all these on physical. We've got, in random order, AVP. That has both of them. I've had that since I was a child. Event Horizon, a Scream Factory 4K. We got Death Race, the extended cut. Monster Hunter, the 4K. Does this have a commentary? It actually doesn't, but it does have a bunch of interviews with the cast and crew, including him, as well as just, there's so many interviews of him and Miller talking about how much he loves the video games. So as much as you would easily say that Paul W.S. Anderson is the reason why video game movies are banned, ironically, he's played them. You know how people complain when someone's making a video game adaptation that they've never played the game? He's played the fucking games. He's just not a great filmmaker. I mean, he's touch and go. I'm going to give him that, because I did watch all of his films. Yeah, Pompeii, the 3D version, which comes with, of course, the 2D version. Resident Evil. This is the 9-film collection, including the 3 animated films of the time. There have been more ever since. And he didn't direct Apocalypse or Extinction, but he did write them. He wrote every single one of these films by himself. Insane. Again, except for the animated ones. So we'll be looking at those quickly, because I did do a video on all of them a couple of years ago. Then we have the 3 Musketeers, which I loved in my youth. Yeah, I'm young. Hi, how's it going? And Mortal Kombat, which this actually is the Annihilation one as well as a steelbook. Pretty decent steelbook pack. Not great for movies. So we'll dive into those as well. By the end of it, we'll do timestamps for every single film. We'll jump into a conclusion with a ranked list of my least favorite Anderson film to my most favorite Anderson film. So let's jump into the first one with Shopping. So we're here with Shopping. It is 1994, peak year for British people saying that it's the 90s and doing independent cinema. What's that? We're doing Fast and Furious like 9 years before Fast and Furious. Actually, wasn't Fast and Furious 2001? Yeah, basically. Still, it's not really Fast and Furious. I thought it was. Like, it's kind of kicks off that way, and then it just doesn't. Which is fine. Like, they start with them stealing a car. He gets out of jail. It's very kind of Blues Brothers-esque. This is Jude Law's character. His feature debut. A lot of feature debuts in this movie. A lot of familiar faces. You'll notice if you watch his early 90s career, Anderson has a lot of the same faces throughout his films because they're mostly British productions. This, Event Horizon, and Soldier all feature a lot of the same cast members. Jason Isaac pops up in a lot of different films from Anderson. He then did like Harry Potter, so he stopped working in Anderson films. Wow. 10 out of 10. Anyway, I gave Shopping 3.5 stars. Despite the low quality 360p version I watched on YouTube, it was still quite enjoyable. It's got the very 90s tinge to it with, British 90s I'll go with, because it's a lot of swearing, it's a lot of angst, a lot of F you to the bigger man kind of thing, which is the only real theme I will say that is consistent throughout any of Anderson's films. It's always great to watch his first film to kind of get an idea of, is he just a filmmaker who just makes movies for money, or is he actually trying to say something? And in this film, he's kind of trying to say something that, like, people's repetitive, destructive behaviors are going to end up killing them rather than them actually growing and moving and evolving. Which is really, really funny, because when you think about it, that's the main arc of his whole entire life. You know, once he got to 2002 with fucking Resident Evil, actually, fuck it. Once he did his next film with Mortal Kombat, he just kept making the same relatively dumb movies that is just, hey, what if characters aren't great, visuals pretty decent, action, sometimes good, and a lot of visual effects, a lot of CGI and stuff, but the occasional practical effect, which I do admire. And that's what he did for the past 30 years of his career. Until, I guess, he crashes his car and dies. I don't know, it depends if he's actually Jude Law's character in this representation. Spoilers, sorry. I don't know if you're going to watch this film. Nevertheless, I think it's a very interesting directorial debut. It doesn't... Anderson's a very weird director in that regard, because you watch his stuff and he's good at stylizing stuff, like the action in the film, which is mostly car chases, and there aren't very many. It's mostly a lot of people talking about how their lives suck and how they're in the poverty line and everything like that, and a lot of swearing at each other, and clearly people who need to develop their relationships better, but they're too caught up in just getting off the high of stealing shit. Shopping is just like an allegory for stealing stuff from rich people and then bragging about it to your friends and then moving on. Like, it literally starts with them stealing a fucking BMW and being like, wow, we stole a BMW, let's go to the place where they showed off all their cars. And I was like, oh, they're going to do a race. And one of the guys stole like a learner car, so it has like the double set of pedals and everything. And then they just don't do anything with that because the cops show up and they all run away. And it's like, oh, so they're not racing cars. They're just stealing them and bragging to their friends about it. And that's what it is. It's just that culture of just, we can't do anything in our lives, so we're just going to keep stealing shit, but also bragging about it to our friends. We're not going to own anything because we can't own anything because we've stolen it all. And when we do steal stuff that we do like, it usually gets broken or destroyed because these are basically all gangs. Yeah. Nevertheless, it would be interesting to see a Blu-ray release of this. I feel like a boutique label like Arrow Video or Eureka, a British label in particular, even Second Sight, probably Second Sight, could do a nice restoration of this, because it still is a noteworthy film. Like, this isn't just some run-of-the-mill piece of shit, low-budget thing. This is actually quite a well-made film, all in of its regard. Like, every once in a while, I'd watch one of Anderson's films and be like, yeah, this is probably the easiest one for a regular person to kind of watch. And I think this is maybe his easiest film to get into. Like, it is his most normal film, and after this, he never really made a normal film again. They were all just had some specific stylization to them and everything that, you know, would either irk people or make people really excited about them. And you probably should know what that means, because most of the time it's either, I don't know, good IP with a weird direction, or bad characters, or weird special effects. So there's a lot of different stuff, but this film has none of that, and is just interesting on its own. So I definitely would recommend Shopping of all of his films. Yeah, if you're going to watch any Anderson film, it's one of the very most lowbrow film that you would think of, and you wouldn't even think it's an Anderson film. So, yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Now, of course, we have Mortal Kombat from 1995. Holy shit. Mortal Kombat is an interesting picture. I like it. No, that's a lie. No, I don't like it. I like the first 20 minutes of it. You know, the visuals are nice, the character story is interesting, the music is fucking banger, you know, it's got a great kind of EDM mixed with obviously one of the greatest, if not the greatest, songs for a movie ever made. Like that Mortal Kombat song, you know what the fuck it is. It's awesome. It's the coolest thing that ever came out of this movie. Because the rest of the movie after the 20-minute mark just goes downhill so fast. Once they get on the ship and suddenly it's, hey, we're going to use a lot of special effects CGI for 1995, and it looks really bad, and it's consistently really bad. They have monsters that turn invisible for no reason. They have Scorpion has a thing that comes out of his hand. That was great. I mean, the part with Sub-Zero was cool, but they don't use him very much. He's very underutilized. As someone who doesn't really care about the games that much, like, I'm not the best person to talk about an adaptation kind of feature, even though I have watched this, Annihilation, and the 2021 Mortal Kombat film, which I'm pretty sure that 2021 film doesn't actually have them doing the tournament. At least this one does. However, this one's tournament is pretty shit, because once they actually start doing the tournament, it's just a regular, like, judo tournament, and it just looks really boring. Like, they have the Australian guy, is his name Kano, and he has, like, this laser eye, and he just doesn't use it at all, and he gets choked to death by a girl, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just with her legs, and they're just vaguely on his throat. Yeah, and then I guess it snaps his neck. I don't care about the characters in this film. Like, I started to, again, initially they have some interesting arcs, except for the cop woman, what's her name? I don't know her name, which is not great. Like, I know Johnny Cage, I know the other guy, again, don't even know his name. What do we got? Liu Kang. Liu Kang's, he has the main story, which is the interesting one, the revenge story. But again, my interest wanes throughout the film. Sonya Blade, she's just not interesting. Lord Raiden, what the fuck was his voice? I don't understand why Christopher Lambert sounds like that. Kari Hiyuki Tagawa, who plays Shang Tsung, not bad. He doesn't really have the great voice for the character, because he's the one who says, like, I mean, he's the main bad guy, but he also says, like, annihilation, fatality. He does all that shit, and it's like, cool. He just does it. They're like, this is an iconic part of the game. We just gotta have a guy just keep saying this kind of shit. Fuck it, why not? He's a bad guy as well, so he will just take their fucking souls? Oh my god. Do I need to explain the plot of this film? It doesn't matter. A bunch, like, 3 heroes have to go to an island to fight in Mortal Kombat, and if they lose, a human realm will be destroyed or some bullshit. Because this is the 10th Mortal Kombat that they've lost, that they're fighting in, and they've lost 9 in a row that we've never heard of before. So that's great, 10 out of 10. And Raiden's there just because. That's great, isn't it? It kind of seems like a buddy film at the same time. There are so many weird elements to this film, but I can't get over kind of just how dull it is. Like, the action is boring as shit. I have no nostalgia for this. I only watched this for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago, and I hated it then, and I still hate it now. It's just got a cool fucking song, so much so that it's like they knew the film was boring, so they just, every time they had a big fight, they would just have the main song play. They'd be like, yeah, that song's playing again. Can't wait to buy the single when I get out of the cinema, and then listen to that for eternity and never watch the film again, and then have the nostalgia for, I gotta watch that movie again, the song is so cool, and you watch it and the song starts and the visuals are great, and it's so well shot, the production design is so fucking good, and everything about it looks great, and then the CGI starts happening, you're like, ooh, and then the characters start getting boring, you're like, ooh, and then the fight scenes start happening, you're like, oh, okay, this is actually really shit, I'm gonna turn this off and put on a different movie. If I want a martial arts film, I'm not gonna watch a fucking Paul W.S. Anderson film. So, yeah, it ain't great. It's definitely not one I'd recommend, even for Mortal Kombat fans. Even though, realistically, if you want a so bad it's good movie, sure, I guess. But I feel like the second one, Annihilation, is so bad it's good, because that's just hilariously bad. That's not boring. It's awful, but it's like, it's awful. But at least it's amusing, so I'll give it that. Anyway, what's next? Next up, we have probably the definitive, everyone thinks of this when they think of Paul W.S. Anderson. They consider it to be his greatest film. It is, of course, Event Horizon. Event Horizon is an interesting film, which was pinned against Soldier initially, which was his film that came out the year after, that he was meant to make Soldier initially, and then Kurt Russell was like, hey, I want to take a year to bulk up for this film. So Anderson was like, great, I'm going to make Event Horizon. So they made Event Horizon, and it's a very infamous film for the fact that it was a rushed production, which meant that they didn't have enough time to edit it, which meant that the final cut that exists isn't the director's cut. It's just the best that they could scavenge out of 3 different cuts: a overly long cut, a not long enough cut, and then a this'll work kind of cut. And of course, again, infamously known for having a bunch of like gory scenes and a supposed, demonic orgy cut out, which you only see through vague sequences and images in the actual feature. And people did criticize it initially for certain aspects of that, and a lot of fans would love to see a director's cut, but of course when you find out that all of the original film print was put into a salt mine in Transylvania and then kind of rotted, we're never going to see that version unless, again, either they reshoot the film or just, I don't know, do other things, and they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So this is what you have, and you kind of got to live with that. And to a degree, rewatching it, I've come to appreciate it more. My initial watch a couple years ago, I gave it 2 stars. I was not big on it. I watched the UHD disc. I thought it looked nice, but knowing the kind of idea that, it's a portal to hell on a ship, it just became, what the fuck is the point of the movie then if I already kind of know that? And the thing is, it's kind of a twist in a way, but it's not really. It's more of the fact that the film is about the Event Horizon being alive because they went to this other dimension, which was meant to be another side of space, but in fact is another dimension entirely. That's a hellish dimension, because hell, as even Sam Neill's character mentions at one stage, is just a word, and it could mean anything. And it's basically just a dimension of pure pain and torture, which, again, other people have noted is a prequel to Warhammer fucking 40k, or the Doom films, or the Doom games, or whatever. It's a thing. So it's really interesting seeing something like that, and how it's the ship that becomes possessed ultimately, as much as the crew do as well. It's because of the influence of the ship. And it makes you wonder to some degree, has anyone actually come out of this with some kind of a proper mentality of, did they go to the other dimension, it was hellish, and then they came back? Or was it in those 7 years that it was that they experienced hell? What happened, And it's there are questions like that sure could be answered, how does the time frame work? Why does Sam Neill's wife keep coming back as a ghost? Why is that never resolved? I understand that, the ending that he was meant to get thrown out of the airlock and died, and then the Burning Man was meant to be a representation of the guilt of Lawrence Fishburne's character. And I can definitely understand, elements to that, where I very much want to see, further discussed elements to this actual film. And again, I watched all these not deleted scenes, but all these behind the scenes stuff, the documentaries, everything that was on the Shout Factory disc talking about it, and how the Burning Man was meant to be a bigger kind of character of, again, all the things that haunt the characters are their own guilt. And I'm like, okay, cool. But then you say that, but then I see all this demonic sequences in the orgy scene, and I'm like, what is their demonic guilt? Do they just hate each other? What's their guilt exactly that this hell is meant to be representing to them? And the thing is, that's kind of what makes me less and less interested in this potential further cut of the film. Could this further cut be something else? But, okay, let's talk about the actual film itself, because why not? It's a film that, despite its some shitty CGI or floating objects to begin with, and I was very much turned off by that initially watching the film the first time around, it is an encapsulation of its own time period for some of those more dated effects, but at the same time, Anderson was very big on practical effects. And, he still is to a big degree, and you can see that because all of the sets are practical. And that's crazy, just to see all of these amazing sets. It's a gorgeously shot film because all this stuff was real. Big-ass sets shot in Pinewood Studios. It's a very interesting film on a production landscape in general. The cast is really interesting. It's got a great selection of characters in general. On my rewatch, I actually gave a shit about some of the characters, which I thought was interesting because the first time around, I'm just I didn't give a shit. And so I like that I have had that turnaround where I'm actually appreciating the aspects of this film. I'm like, I can see why people love this, and I'm starting to really love it myself. But it'll always be an imperfect film for that reason, because it's not realistically a complete film, even just in regards to just certain character arcs and certain beats like that. I'm also not big on the ending per se, because they do a fake out dream sequence and then have some bad ADR. And it's stupid. They've got a fight scene kind of thing with Fishbone's character and Sam Neill's character, where he's getting thrown around, as in Fishbone's character, or Fish, according to Paul W.S. Anderson. Who'd have thought he calls them Fish? And you get all these goofy sound effects, and I'm just like, I'm not really there for that. Like, I don't need it to sound like someone's punching a bowl of salad. This is weird. But again, it does have some just great effects in general. But yeah, I don't love the first act as much, with trying to get into the characters and understanding them and everything. As much as I grow to like them throughout the journey of the film, whatever, I don't love when they get to the event horizon initially and it's a lot of creepiness and, oh, there might be jump scares. There are jump scares, and I don't fucking like any of that stuff. I think it's dumb as shit. I think the scary part comes from not that, but the actual horror of just the idea of what's happening, like the unfathomable, but also the fact that the ship has gone to a hellish dimension and has been possessed by this dimension enough to A, open the rift whenever, but also B, utilize it to get into everyone's heads, and their own guilt is what traumatizes them and is what affects them and is what makes them either want to kill themselves or whatever. And it's just really interesting seeing all that stuff happen. Like, the character who gets put into the portal initially and then comes back out only to want to kill themselves and puts themselves in the airlock, and it's a great sequence. But once they're put in the sick bay and then put in the bloody cryosleep, their character is not interesting anymore, because they're just gone from the movie. It's like, oh, they almost died and they're going to be traumatized for life, but hey, we're not going to look at that anymore. Fuck that for a joke. I'm like, oh no. So I don't know, it's still a hit and miss film. I still gave it 3.5 stars. I very much still enjoyed it this time around. And again, it looks great on the 4K scan, at least from Screen Factory. Looks great. The UHD did look better, but I'm content with the version I have. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting film. And I follow a lot of people on Letterboxd who hate it and who love it, and it's really interesting seeing the opposite reactions to it, especially people who claim that this is Anderson's best film, which I thoroughly disagree with, because it just doesn't feel like a complete enough film for me to think it's his best. It's not even like, if you go from like accessibility, it's not even his most accessible film, because you're missing so much to begin with, and also just the fact that like it's a science fiction film, but it's also a horror film. It's going for the Shining in space. It's vibing off Alien as well. There's elements of, I love what it's inspired by, but it's not completely getting there. Like, I don't think Anderson's the same kind of director as, Kubrick. He's not the same kind of writer either, despite the fact that he didn't write this film, nor did he even write Soldier, his next film. It's when he starts writing his films that you can really question if he's actually a good filmmaker. So, yeah. So let's jump into the next film. Soldier from 1998, released actually the day I was born. Crazy. Technically, 23rd of October 1998 in America. 24th is my actual birthday, but I coincide the same dates as the same kind of thing, because usually the time that's happening now for me presently is always the past in America. That's just how it works. Time zone stuff. So, yeah, like serendipitously at the exact same moment right now is when it would have happened, so I don't know, it's just a fun thing. You could easily say, Julian, you're being delusional, it was not released on your birthday, and no, it wasn't, but technically it was. Also, it wasn't officially globally released till like the 20th of November, but that doesn't matter. I gave the film 3 stars. It's fine. I watched it on Apple TV. I actually rented it for like $3, and the HD print looked pretty good. It did cut out the audio occasionally, which was annoying. But, yeah, it's an interesting film. It's one of the, I feel like, understated ones of Anderson's career, where people just don't seem to really talk about it that much. Even my friend who's very big into Anderson's films, as much as I'd say as much as myself, but he made me more interested in them than I initially thought fucking possible. Says that this is the only one of his filmography that's like completely unnecessary to watch, and I very much disagree, because Anderson's very good at capturing effects in a scope, and this is a film that designed as a Blade Runner sequel or spin-off, and kind of has at least enough Easter eggs where it talks about like the shoulder of Orion, the battle there, which is Kurt Russell's character of, oh shit, what was his name? It wasn't Todd. Todd. Kurt Russell plays Todd. Fucking dumb name for a action movie like this. And he, he fights a bunch of battles, whatever, which you don't see. You see parts of them through some flashbacks, but mostly the first 20 minutes is him being raised from baby to maybe 30-year-old as a soldier until he gets replaced by a emotionless model that can just be printed out of a machine. And then he gets they think he's dead, so they kick him off onto a desert planet that's got a lot of junk. It's a junkyard planet. If you've seen Thor Ragnarok, same plot for the first half at least. It's actually a very similar plot to Thor Ragnarok in general. It's just that they don't go out of the junkyard until the very end of the movie, so they don't go back to any particular base anyway. And yeah, he goes there and he becomes friends with the people, even though he's very much a soldier whose thoughts are just fight and fear and whatever. And he, has a kind of love interest, but of course she's married, so guess who dies in the movie? And that guy has a kid, and, there's just stuff like that where he's an interesting character because he doesn't talk much, and when he does, he doesn't say much. It's mostly through the visuals of literally just him glaring at people and whatever, or just the somberness in his eyes. A very visual performance just from his facial expressions alone. If you're big into action cinema and you want a big action film, this isn't it until the last act. The first third of the movie is him growing up, played by Wyatt Russell in one scene, who was 11 years old at the time, or at least plays the 11-year-old version of him, which is insane. And he looked exactly like him. He has no lines of dialogue, but it's just wow. So when the MonsterVerse show came out, the Monarch Legacy of Monsters, people said, this is the first time the same character's been played by the same actor and their son. No, Soldier did it first, and it's the same fucking people. Anyway, just a fun note. And so they end up, after, again, the montage of his life, whatever, he does this big military training thing, gets kicked to the planet. That's the first act. You see the spinner from Blade Runner. It's just buried there, but it's there. You see it a couple times. It's not really highlighted, but it's just there. They don't go over to it and they're this is the spinner. This is what this does. It's just there. It's set decoration. It's just a bunch of crap. In a cave, with a bunch of crap. Anyway, so he ends up again befriending the people. Gets kicked out because they think that he's gonna be too violent because he happens to not save a kid from getting attacked by a snake, but the thing is he's teaching the kid how to survive. The kid doesn't die or anything, he just doesn't kill the snake until the dad comes out. He's he could have died, but he's teaching the kid, and that becomes obvious later when a snake is going to attack those people when they're sleeping. The kid hits it with a boot and they realize, oh fuck, this is what he was teaching him. We fucked up, we got to get this guy back. And just as the guy goes out to get him back, the bad guys show up. The bad guys being the military, who are going planet by planet killing everyone. And anyway, then big fight ensues. It's a 20-minute fight. It's really interesting because it really emphasizes what Russell's character has learned about the planet and surviving it, as well as just in general being very military prone, fighting against people who are designed as the perfect soldier who have no fucking battle experience. It's visually quite interesting. It's a very nice looking film in general. It's generally quite fun. It's a perfectly fine, just kind of, I'd say, switch off your brain and just enjoy kind of movie, but there is enough character stuff here and enough to kind of just read from people's emotions and their acting to understand what's actually been told, rather than it explicitly being told to you. So it's a surprisingly smart film for what it is. I think it's very deserving of praise. It's still not a hugely amazing film. I think that it does things narratively that other films have done better, and even visually in certain action scenes and stuff. I've seen other films do it better, but for what it's worth, the film in its own right is still quite interesting. But I can see why there could be complaints about it. But I think, like, look, if you go into it for this experience of seeing like a soldier diminished by his literal reason to live, and it becomes a really interesting commentary on elements of just, I was going to say, of like kind of military propaganda and operations, and maybe arguments of like fascism and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things to look at in that regard. But yeah, it's really interesting for that, to that degree. But yeah, so as an overall, I still think it's pretty fun. I might rate it higher in the future. I definitely need to get a Blu-ray release of this because it has the commentary track, but it's like out of print, so that's not great. Anyway, what's the next film? Now we're at The Sight from 2000. This is Paul W.S. Anderson's failed TV pilot. It basically was a... Well, if you've seen in the mid-2000s, you had like Supernatural, Medium, and Ghost Whisperer. It's basically that, but 5 years too early. It's an American architect goes to London to help design a building, and he hits a woman with his car, who then gives him the gift of the sight, even though she apparently has chosen him anyway. And then he sees ghosts, and he has 21 ghosts to deal with, all of whom, or at least some of whom, are basically like, hey, so there's this serial killer, this modern day Jack the Ripper going around butchering children. Can you help us to stop him? Because we don't like having to hang out with kids. Because it's creepy and weird. So it's fine on its own. Like, I gave it 3 stars. It's enjoyable. Like, it has enough of a beginning, middle, end for its own thing, because it is an hour and a half, but it is again, pilot, because a lot of pilots back in the 90s, 2000s, say Twin Peaks, for example, were an hour and a half long. They were feature length. This does end with a tag of, there's going to be an apocalypse, he has to stop it, but of course, this show never got picked up, so that never happened, which is always funny to see when that stuff happens. I'm really fond of TV movies, usually solo TV movies that are their own night of the week kind of things, but the ones that are actually trying to be like TV pilots are really amusing to me, because you kind of have to get into the characters and you see what the shortcomings are. And the shortcomings for this is just that it's kind of generic in a way. Like, I think it's ironically some of the best written work Anderson's done, because it's like the most coherent. Like, one of the criticisms I will have about all of his films is that usually the characters lack depth and really lack any kind of characterization. I mean, look at the Resident Evil films. And there's just a degree where there's certain actions, a certain person gets from A to Z, and it just doesn't jump well. And this actually has all of it in the best capacity, because I don't have any of those problems with this. This is just a pretty okay failed pilot TV movie with a good cast, an interesting premise. It interestingly utilizes the premise. I think it just also has a big plot hole where they're trying to emphasize that the main character, who's the American guy, does get arrested because he knows too much about the case for him to not be the killer, but they never make the connection of there were 7 other murders and this is only the 8th. Was he in London for those 7 other murders? Because I'm pretty fucking sure he wasn't. So it's like, excuse me? So, yeah, outside of that really glaring plot hole, not bad. I would, if you're a big diehard Anderson fan, I would suggest it, but I don't know if you're going to get much out of the very obvious, hey, because the guy sees ghosts, there are going to be jump scares in the start of it, so it's that cliche of his attempt at jump scares, which aren't scary, but also it does have a lot of Alice in Wonderland stuff. It is a very common motif in the Resident Evil films for there to be an Alice in Wonderland thing. You know, the Red Queen, the girl's name is Alice, other stuff that is Alice in Wonderland coded. It's very much there. But this is hardball. It has like a Mad Hatter cafe. It has he has a rabbit that's a chess piece. There's a lot of shit like that. I don't know why it's there. Like, I guess because it's just thematically relevant, because the girl that he's like, that's been the most recent death, is named Alice, and the rabbit hole is like a metaphor for, you know, diving into this lifestyle of, like, helping ghosts to, you know, stop the killers. You know the movie Ghost? It's like that, but bad. So there you go. It's okay. Nevertheless, let's move on to the Resident Evil films. Now, I'm just going to jump straight into it because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these films to talk about. Now, I did reevaluate and watch all of these films. I actually double featured the first 2, watched the third one by itself, and then triple featured the last 3, because I've got a head cold right now. For the rest of this video, I didn't, except for this one goddamn part. So I just had the day off of work, so I binged Resident Evil 3, 4, and 5. No, 4, 5, and 6, as well as The Sight, all in one day. Get it over and done with. What a band-aid. Anyway, so we start with Resident Evil 2002. I gave it 3 stars. I am often on about my enjoyment of this film. I do enjoy it. I think it's the easiest one of these films to consume realistically. It has very obvious narrative devices, very obvious horror jump scare setups. The zombies are fine for what they are. It's interesting knowing that this was meant to be a origin story for the franchise that is the games, rather than it being a direct adaptation, hence why none of the game characters are in it. Anderson deliberately did that so they wouldn't have to, so people could, the audience could be scared that, oh, this character could still die, because you're not watching Jill Valentine shoot zombies, because you know she wouldn't die because she's in all the games. So that was an interesting thing, introducing Alice as a brand new character, Mila Jovovich, who became his wife. They started dating after the movie and everything, have had 3 kids, one of whom is in the final chapter. Her name is Eva, which is really stupid. What is with Hollywood people naming their children stupid names? Eva Anderson, what does that even mean? So, anyway, Mila's fun. I like her in the role of Alice. She becomes interestingly more developed as the films go along. Of course, this is the one that emphasizes she's lost, memory, because that's how she wakes up. You see her nipples at some stage, it's all noteworthy stuff. It's cinema, baby. But, it has all the regular stuff. She happens to be an action hero, but she doesn't know it because she's got amnesia. She kicks butt. She kicks zombie dogs in the face, which is pretty fun. It's got a fun cast overall. Michelle Rodriguez is great. I love that she's in basically the whole entire film. The Red Queen is okay. I don't really care much for her as a villain. The whole entire series, I don't care much for her as a villain. She only shows up in 3 films, and by the 3rd, she's a good guy. And they've got the White Queen in 1 film only. It's silly. These are kind of the films that have this weird thing of they were not planned out. It was written on the go. Capcom was really adamant that they do this thing in this film and that thing in that film. So each film was basically dictated by Capcom rather than by Anderson. They just let him write all of them, even though he only directed 4 of the 6. Because again, Extinction and Afterlife, 2 other people directed. One of them who'd never directed before was for Afterlife and I'm thinking Apocalypse. For Apocalypse, and then Extinction was a film that was directed by an Australian director who did the Highlander film and the sequel and Razorback. So some noteworthy films in his filmography, but also some bad films in his filmography. I guess give a dog a bone. So it's as a write-up, I will say that I prefer the films that Anderson directed. In terms of his writing style, it's very touch and go all the time. There will be some stupid lines of dialogue, some character motivations that don't make any sense, some parts where characters will just appear out of nowhere and then disappear again. And same as zombies, it's just for the jump scare aspect of zombies, just appearing out of nowhere or very quietly and then suddenly becoming very loud because scary, I think is stupid. I hate that trope in horror, and that's just what he does in all these films. So I watch them more as action films than horror films because they're not scary. Zombies are never scary. Sorry, they just aren't. I like them when they're goofy or they get shot to pieces, I guess. And they look bloody and gory and stuff. The zombies in, Extinction, look fucking awesome. Extinction and Afterlife have some great looking zombies. Really, really fucking good. The ones in Final Chapter aren't too bad, but you don't get a great look at them because of how poorly that movie's cut. The first one I enjoy. It's, again, touch and go for me to really love it or not, but I'm happy with the 3 stars. I think it's a perfectly enjoyable film. And then we move on to Apocalypse, which I wasn't going to watch, but I felt he did write them. I kind of have to do that. Apocalypse, I gave a 1.5 stars. I think it is awfully directed. I kind of really hate this film. It's stupid as shit. the villains are annoying, the humans are annoying, the protagonists are annoying. Nemesis looks like fucking dumb shit, even though he's accurate to the game. Jill Valentine is hilarious because she only shows up because suddenly she's allowed to go back into the office because they're calling in all cops, and she just goes in and kills a bunch of people. They're all infected, so she's smart, but it's also really like stupid and egotistical. It's just funny. It's a really dumb film. It very much captures moments from the first film with, like, again, oh, zombie dogs, oh, this and that, and weird traps and stuff. You get some more liquors, which look better in this film than the previous one. They look the best in Retribution, very clearly. I love the liquor. The liquor in Retribution is fucking awesome. But, yeah, I just don't care for the characters. There are too many of them. The problem is this one also sets up all of, like, the characters that you basically need to know about by the next few films. So, yeah. It's a give and take. As someone who's not a fan of the video games, I have no commentary on that kind of stuff, but as someone who likes cinema, this is not my cup of tea. I find it more enjoyable the more I watch it. Like, I actually, when I watched it, it was 4 years to the day that I watched it the first time around on my Letterboxd, because I had seen it as a kid, and then rewatched it in, like, 2021, which was March 31st, and then I watched it 2 years later with my brother because he wanted to watch all the films, so we watched all of them, and I started to appreciate them more. This one I still don't. I'm getting to the point where I might actually really, really like this a lot in the future, but just because it's dumb shit. Like, I can't rate it highly, but I might give it a like, but I haven't hit that point yet. Resident Evil, at least the first one, I've given a like, which usually I don't. That's a thing on Letterboxd. It's the little heart button. Anyway, let's move on from Apocalypse, because it's fucking dumb. Extinction. Fun. Again, gave it 3 stars. I think it gets better on rewatch. I enjoyed it a lot more. It seems emptier, like nothing much happens, because nothing does happen, realistically. Alice finds the survivors from the previous film, despite the fact that we don't know why she isn't with them anymore. Valentine's vanished. The girl who was literally the plot device of the second film has also vanished and is never spoken of again, even though she literally has, like, a cure for the T-virus in her blood. They just don't talk about her again. We're not here for continuity, okay? This series is not continuity-centered at all. It's just put the characters in a location, fight zombies, kill a boss, move on to the next one. And that's basically all these films are when you really think about it. We don't care about continuity as long as Alice doesn't die, and that's about it. You know, by this film, Alice has superpowers now. She's got telekinesis. She looks very washed over, like she's got a constant Photoshop job on her face, which is hilarious because they're in the fucking desert. The zombies look great. The extra characters that they have, who I think were actually more interesting in the previous film, I like that they're back in this film. I don't know, I appreciate them more in the third, but they're more interesting in the second film. I don't understand it. Some of them are just there, and then they die. They all fucking die. And those who don't get in the helicopter and fly off to the next film, while Alice fights the big bad guy, and then realizes she has 1,000 clones. So then, of course, you jump into Afterlife, where she has 1,000 fucking clones. And you see, I'm just jumping through this. Fuck the other films that Anderson did in the meantime. We're powering through. Afterlife, I like a lot more. This one I gave 3.5 stars. I like it a lot more as time goes on as well, because initially it was like, the action scene at the start is so dumb, but so fucking fun. And once you kind of appreciate that element, you appreciate the rest of the series, because they're dumb action films. You're not meant to take them seriously. You just see, oh, here's 30 different clones of Alice fighting a bunch of Japanese soldiers, no zombies in sight, and then it's like, cool, there are no emotional stakes in this, we're just watching this for fun now. So, yeah, then she flies around and vlogs before finding Claire, and then she finds a prison, and then they have to escape the prison, and there's a great boss battle scene in that as well, and then they get to it's more of a mini-boss, you know, the guy with the big axe, and then they get out of the prison, and now the zombies have, again, they've evolved, blah, they've got weird things coming out of their mouth. I don't know why, they just do. Then you move on to, they find a ship, and they find Wesker, they fight Wesker, bada bing, bada boom. Look, there's an army of fucking ships coming. Wesker blows the fuck up, yet he still survives for the next film. I don't know how. It's not clarified that he's a clone, ever. They never mention it. They just never mention the fact that he blew up, and also he's fine. It's stupid. I guess he's just like, invincible or something because he has superpowers for some reason. I don't know. It's stupid. I love it. I think by the end of Afterlife, she loses her powers, so then she becomes human again. Actually, it's the start of the movie. She becomes human again, and she's thankful for that, even though it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. Like, she gets injured in Retribution, which I love. I gave it 5 stars. I adore this film. She gets wounded in this at one stage. Even points out that she's like got a blood coming from her waist, potentially being shot or something, and they just never mention it again because none of it matters. You're here to watch a bunch of people go through literally stages of a video game to fight boss after boss after boss, and then get out and fight the bad guy, the big boss. The big boss is always a human person, like a part of the video game or part of the narrative canon. It's never a big mutated guy, except for in the third film. It's usually just Wesker or someone else. The Jill Valentine, but with a weird thing on her chest because she's mind controlled, or Michelle Rodriguez because she's back in this one. This one's great. They just bring back all the fan favorite characters who are from the movies originally, not from the video games, and then they also bring in some video game characters. Just because they can, because fuck it, why not? Let's bring in Ada Wong and that other guy and that other guy. I don't know the other guys' names. I don't care. They're not video game accurate. I mean, one of them who's meant to be video game accurate tries to flirt with fucking Ada Wong, and I know in the games he does not do that. Leon S. Kennedy. He's a nerdy type. He's not meant to be like macho, sexy or whatever. He might look it, but he's not meant to be. Nevertheless, I love Retribution. I gave it 5 stars. It's a masterpiece. It is just the peak of popcorn cinema. It's pure adrenaline action bullshit. It opens with a backwards slow motion action set piece that then shows you that set piece within literally 20 seconds, which is fucking insane, and you understand everything that's happening because you've already seen it happen in slow motion backwards. And yeah, then Alice is like, oh shit, I've woken up in the compound, we're on the ground in, I think, Russia or some Eastern European place. We have to like get out of here, but also I've got the Wesker is now a good guy and has sent Ada Wong to help her. And they have to go through different places, which is like Tokyo and Russia and I think London at once. No, suburbia. There are a lot of different places there, but they only go for a couple. Which then all incorporates more clones and gives you more bad guys of all different types. Again, you like the guy with the big axe? Now there's 2 of them. You like the liquor? Now there's a gigantic liquor. You like the Russians? Now they're zombies, I guess. It's stupid, but it's so fucking fun. Jill Valentine's still the villain. She's so dumb. I love it. I think intentionally because, again, she's mind-controlled. Yeah, there's just a lot of dumb shit in this, and I really like it. It's got an Aliens vibe in a way because Miller's character becomes more motherly. Is that necessary? No. That daughter that she basically adopts because it's a daughter of her clone, who I don't think is actually even her daughter genetically, just never shows up in the 5th one. Every single character you love never shows up again, basically. Even Claire and her brother, who was in the 4th one, Claire was in the 3rd one, and then in the 4th one, and then not in the 5th one, but then she's in the 6th one. Why? I don't know. Her character is presumed dead because that whole entire ship blew up, but it's like, no, apparently she got captured and then escaped. Her brother, let's just never talk about him again. Literally, never talk. Fuck, who cares? He's not important. He wasn't even that interesting to begin with. He's just the guy from Prison Break. He was hot at the time. Let's move on. And of course, then you get to the final chapter, which is just a slog to get through. I hate this film. I gave it 1 star. I toss and turn between 1 to 1.5. I watched an extended version of this film, which is called the Retaliation Mode version, which just every couple of minutes or something, it adds basically half an hour of runtime, and it just cuts to Miller and Paul talking about the films, talking about casting Miller, talking about certain action scenes or how they did certain visual effects or stunt work, all these different elements about the film itself and why they narratively chose this ending over a different one, reflecting on the series as a whole. It's really interesting for that degree because I really like behind the scenes stuff. But then every time I cut back to the movie, I remembered, right, I don't like this movie. The final chapter is overcut to hell. I hate its visual style. It looks ugly. The visual effects are still good. Like the mutant creatures still look interesting. But you can't take much respect in their visual design, because every 3 seconds there's a cut, maybe every 2 seconds there's a cut to a different shot or a slightly different angle. And it's back and forth so often that your mind just can't comprehend what you're looking at, and it's just worthless. It's worthless slop. I don't know what I've just looked at. It's just gone through the cutter, and it means nothing to me anymore. There's a fight scene with a guy who I'm pretty sure was Thai, and they really emphasize how he was a black belt and he was really cool and really good at his job, and how he didn't need a stunt double because he could do it all himself. He even like almost kicked Miller in the face like several times, but purposely missed because that was part of the stunt. And it's really cool to know about that and to see the behind the scenes footage of him doing that. But then when they cut to him actually doing it in the film, it's cut so many times you just don't know what the fuck's happening. All the effect of it is gone because it's boiled down to like 10 seconds of maybe he fought her, maybe he didn't. I don't even know anymore. Do I think it still ends well? Sure, I guess. I don't dislike the ending. I just dislike the film. I don't like how it has to open with this whole, oh, hey, let's talk about, the origin of the T-virus and everything, something that was actually established in the second film, but we're just not going to talk about that version. We're going to talk about this version, and it has to do with Miller's character and how Alice herself is a clone, and that's why she has no memories. Over the past 10 years, she's never thought about her childhood, which seems barbaric to me. I really hate how this movie characterizes her. It's stupid as hell. The only good thing about this film is that it has the best line in the series, which is simply,
"The trinity of bitches, united in their hatred."
It's the only good line in the whole entire franchise. The only memorable one, at least. So yeah, all the characters you love, probably dead. Everything gone. Wasteland. It looks like shit. It's annoying. It's like they took the visual appeal of the third film and then gave it the narrative appeal of the second film and the editing appeal of the second film. And it's bad. It's very bad. So, yeah. Anyway, on to the next one. Alien vs. Predator. This one I haven't watched for a couple of years. I gave it 2.5 stars. I was not going to rewatch it. I watched it back in 2021. I think I'm content with that. Watched on Disney Plus with a couple mates. And as someone who loves the Alien films, who loves the Predator films, I did watch this and its sequel growing up. We're never talking about the sequel. I'm never watching that film again. That film, god-awful, disgusting piece of shit. This one's fine, but it's just too... The thing of why I gave it like 2.5 stars is because, realistically, it's PG as fuck. It's really tame. An Alien film should never be PG. It's pathetic that it was. Like, the Predators are known for ripping people's fucking spines out. The Aliens are known for literally shooting their own mini mouths into people's heads and blowing that up, or ripping out of their chests, or face fucking them. There's so much that you could get from amazing, gory, fucked up imagery from a franchise like this. And I don't really... Can I even credit, like, Anderson as the reason why this movie sucks fucking ass? I feel like I can't because I'm pretty sure it's a Weinstein film. Was it a Weinstein film? I don't think it actually is. No, it isn't. What the fuck? Okay, well, it credits Anderson as story. It credits a couple people as story. You got Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. But I'm pretty sure they did the Alien films. Or maybe he did the Alien. He did Alien. Anyway, they always credit those. That's just legacy credits for just characters. Same as Jim Thomas and John Thomas, who I'm pretty sure probably did Predator. Yep, they did the Predator ones. So outside of crediting the writers of the original fucking properties, the guy who did the story and wrote the movie was Paul W.S. Anderson. So you can definitely give him the credit for fucking bad. It's arguable that maybe this could have been a MA-15 plus kind of movie, a for not the kids kind of movie. But given how seems like it was pretty decided early on that it's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to have a bunch of aliens fight a bunch of predators, and there's going to be some humans there, and they're going to be underneath the ice in a secret pyramid layer. And all the gore is going to be green, because if it was red, we'd have to rate it higher, and the humans get killed off, but we're not going to show them die, for the most part. There's an alien queen at one stage, which is fucking hilarious. Just rips itself out of the ice, and it's just like, I'm going to chase the main character down the iceway, and then I'm going to fall into the ice again. And the predators are going to become best friends with this human character, and then one of the predators is going to get face fucked, and then at the end of the movie, it's going to have a chest burster revealing a predalien. It's going to set up a sequel, and you're going to be like, wow, I can't wait for that movie because this one was fucking boring. Because it is. I don't remember loving it as a kid. I definitely didn't love it this time around, or at least back in 2021. I don't need to watch it again. I remember what happens. I remember my experience very well. Me and my mates, I think it was Bill and Guy, got on Discord and watched it, and we were just like, damn, this fucking movie's boring as shit. It's okay as a general thing, but it's just not great. Like, I feel like even now I would rate it maybe lower just because it's just a bit too dull. But then again, at least it has plot in contrast to later films like Monster Hunter. So, maybe 2.5 still feels appropriate. Yeah, it's an interesting concept, like if you don't count it in the canon of the actual Alien universe, where it's like, what if the Predators used humans to farm aliens so they could fight them in big battles? Like, that's a fun idea. Someone played the video game. I know I did. In the time between watching the film on DVD as a kid to watching the film 20 years later, well, not 20 years later, maybe 15 years later, very much so in that time I played the video games, some of them. I definitely played some of the old, like the emulated, like, I think they were N64 games or something. Like, I played a couple of the computer games as well because me and my mates used to play them a lot. And Aliens as a franchise scared me to death as a kid. Traumatized me, quite literally. Like, I was just nightmares for a decade. It took me a very long time to get over that fear. And there are still elements to it where it makes me scared to watch new films. Even watching Alien Romulus, I was scared going into it, but I sat in and kind of enjoyed it and loved it, and that was its own experience. But rewatching this, I'm like, this is just like a popcorn film with bad versions of your favorite characters. It's like watching Ready Player One, a popcorn piece of shit directed by a great filmmaker who was getting a hell of a paycheck so he could make the musical he's been wanting to make for a long time. Like, with just cardboard cutouts of characters that are like, oh wow, I remember that guy. He didn't do that in the original movie. What are you doing? You know, so it's... I have this on DVD. It's not great, but I did watch it on Disney Plus because it's now owned by fucking Disney. That's so funny. Yeah, I don't know. Not great. Anyway, let's move on. And then we have Death Race from 2008. Now, to precede this, I actually did watch the original 95 film, Death Race 2000, the Roger Corman produced film, which I find hilarious because in the 2008 credits, it's like, based on the Death Race 2000, produced by Roger Corman. Like, it's not directed by this guy or written by that guy, it's just produced by Roger Corman, because he just owned the rights, and, you know, whatever. I will say, to begin with, I prefer the original. I like its campiness, I like its satire, I like its blood and gore. The characters are fun, the cars are fun. It's still stupid as shit, but it's also cool. It's like, oh, I didn't realize the whole point of the movie was that they're racing from A to Z, and it's to kill as many pedestrians as possible to score points. That's great. What a fun premise, you know? And that's just in the intermediate. The rest of it's like, oh, it's a totalitarian fascist government. There are literal fucking Nazis there, and they have to take down this government. It's like The Running Man, you know? It's in that era of, like, just anti-establishment, futuristic, capitalist, gotta kill the capitalist society kind of stuff. It's really like totalitarian capitalist kind of stuff. I like it. Anyway, the 2008 one, on the other hand, is a prison movie. Yeah, it's still okay. I gave it 3 stars. It has pros and cons again, like most Paul W.S. Anderson films. It benefits from being a Jason Statham action movie, which they're pretty fun. You know, you go in it with a grain of salt, just expecting a fun action film, and that's basically all you get. There's no real bleeding subtext or anything. There's no real commentary on prison cultures or anything. It's set in the near future, but also just... I think it's set in 2020, actually. But it's also just not really saying anything as well. It's just giving you a basic setting. It's the future. Things are shitty and more people are going to prison for no real reason. I guess because reasons. You know, Statham's character is a poor worker who is framed for his wife's murder and potential murder of his kid, even though it's shown pretty early in that the kid was just readopted into a new family. And he has to play Frankenstein, put on the mask, a really boring mask, in contrast to the original. Holy shit. Like the original Carradine version where he's got this black gimp suit and like a beat up face, only for him to peel off the face and he's just a normal guy just wearing a fucking mask, is really funny. But in this one, it's just him. It's just Statham wearing a fucking metal mask. He doesn't even have a voice manipulator. He just sounds like himself. It's really weird. I'm like, he just gets on the phone to a guy and just talks, and the guy who's been fighting Frankenstein for the past couple of races, who actually killed him without knowing it, is like, man, you sound a lot like Jason Statham. What the fuck's up with that? So, it's not a very smart movie. It's perfectly fine. Again, I watched the extended cut. Which is only 4 minutes longer. It's the kind of film where, because of its visual style, it looking very grey, very much of the time period where very, very grey movies, it makes it very ugly to look at times. The cars are all grey, which doesn't help, because when you're looking at a race in the surroundings of a prison industrial complex that's also, like, how can they afford this kind of complex to do these races in? Is it the whole building? I know they kind of established it well enough, but it's like, there are 3 different races at 3 different times. Is it all the same fucking place? Is it just 3 different areas of the same prison? They've just built the prison around a fucking racetrack? What the fuck is happening? It's very strange. The idea behind it is a lot stupider than the original. At least the original had fun with it. Like, oh, the city is this futuristic dystopia, but then you go into the countryside and everyone's just poor and sucks. And that's why it looks like the 70s still, because, well, America's behind the times kind of deal. It's a really good commentary. This one, on the other hand, is just meant to be the future, but it isn't. And it just, you know... At least they're live streaming. I'll give it that. They understood the concept that live streaming would be big, and it is big. But when they said it, like, they have 80 million viewers, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not a lot. Like, for even, like, the most popular streamer, like, at all. And the fact that you got to pay for it too, I'm like, man, to pay like $250 for like that? Are you kidding me? Anyway, that's a thing. See if Ninja was in it. Oh god. But yeah, the cars are all grey, which doesn't help. As someone who's not a big car person, it's harder to identify the cars, and I know that, like, his car is one that has red stripes, like 2 red stripes, but because of how the colour grading of the film is, it's very grey, so you can't tell a lot of the difference from a lot of the fast cuts. The first race is very quickly cut, so a lot of the impact and the action is kind of a big messy blur, because you're like, I'm trying to figure out and understand what I'm actually fucking looking at here, and you just don't know what you're looking at a lot of the time. As the film progresses, it becomes easier to understand because you have more time to develop your eye for it, and also they've got mostly only these stylized edits and cuts during the races. They've got a lot of, like, whip zooms and constantly, like, you're in the car looking at the people in the dash and it's zooming in and out constantly. You know, it's cutting between cars, cutting between shots and different angles and different characters. There's a lot of tenacity in it. It keeps on going. And as each race goes, because there's only 3 of them, more people get killed off, whatever, so you only have more of a focus point as it goes along, which makes it more comprehensible. The second race, 2 people die, and I'm like, wait, were they real people in cars, or were they just the empty cars that were just surrounding the place? Turns out they were just 2 people. I'm like, who the fuck were these people? I don't know who they were. I've never seen them before. So, it's also one of those where it has too many characters that they just have a bunch of them be fodder. Like, in the original, it was 5 teams. One of them were Nazis, the other one was Stallone, and the other one was fucking Carradine. The other 2, who gives a shit, but they had enough character that when they died, you're like, man, this is fun. And that's it. That's all you get, you know? It's just fun that they die or that they don't. And yeah, it's just, this one is just like, I don't actually care about the characters. It's very, again, I don't know if you're really meant to, because it's just a macho fucking Jason Statham movie, and it's like, fine, I guess. I don't know. Anderson did these between doing the Resident Evil films, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but Miller's not in it, so I'll give it that. And then he married Miller, like, the year after it came out. Crazy. Anyway. So I wouldn't not recommend it. It's fun for what it is. Like, it's an enjoyable film if you're okay with this visual style. And it is just kind of popcorn cinema, just macho popcorn cinema, which is fine. But the original concept is a lot better, a lot stronger, and a lot more cartoonish, but also nicely satirical than the original, whereas this one just doesn't have that. And I kind of don't like that it doesn't have that, because I'm like, what if this movie was the same as the original, where they're going from a futuristic city, and then maybe they're still prisoners or something, so if they try to escape Suicide Squad style, they get blown up. I don't know. But they're still racing from point A to point Z, so you're still getting different visual landscapes, but they also have to, like, kill pedestrians on the way. That gives you a lot of blood and gore. But this movie was clearly just made for a PG kind of audience, even though... Where is it? Well, it's rated MA on my Blu-ray, so strong violence and coarse language, because it just has that. Also, it's very, very much sexualizes every single woman in the film except for the main bad guy, which is like, yeah, that seems about right. Sure, linger on her ass. Why don't you, movie? You got nothing better to do. You know who your audience is, so, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. The Three Musketeers from 2011. Yeah, I'm okay on this film. Again, it was written by two other people, which is Alex Litvak and Andrew Davies, who have, one of them wrote Predators and the other one wrote, a bunch of the Bridget Jones films? Holy shit, what the fuck? Andrew Davies wrote a bunch of, period dramas. Pride and Prejudice, Bridget Jones, War and Peace. What the fuck? Dr. Zhivago? I've heard of so many of these films. That is crazy that he just wrote that. I guess, I don't know, maybe he's good at writing costume dramas, and they're like, we need someone who's good at writing costume dramas, but also someone who's good at writing action films. So let's get them to partner up, and we'll get Paul W.S. Anderson to come in. His wife is going to play Milady, because she's hot, and he knows how to shoot her like she's hot, because he knows how to fucking shoot her like she's hot. And then we're going to get, a bunch of people who you might or might not have heard of before, like Logan Lerman, who was pretty hot back then. Remember when Percy Jackson came out? Or Matthew McFadden. Remember the guy from Pride and Prejudice? He's Athos. He's okay. Logan Lerman's D'Artagnan. Mila Jovovich is Milady de Winter. Ray Stevenson, Ripperoni to a good pepperoni, is actually not bad as Porthos. He's pretty fun. He's got a lot of charisma. It's great. And Luke Evans. Wait, Luke Evans and Orlando Bloom? Aren't they the same guy? Oh, right. Remember, do you ever see that? Luke Evans and Orlando Bloom, and they look exactly the same? I had a colleague who thought that they were the same person. He was like, I watched this movie with, was it? Oh my god, they're in The Hobbit as well. Holy shit. He was talking about a different movie, and he was talking about how Orlando Bloom was, and I'm like, no, you're thinking of Luke Evans. And he's like, what? Who's Luke Evans? I'm like, and I showed him the photo, and the first photo was the two of them right next to each other. I'm like, that's Orlando. That's Luke Evans. That guy is a movie star. That guy's married to Katy Perry. Anyway, he's also a movie star. So, Orlando Bloom is the bad guy, who's only in 3 scenes. But then you've also got Mads Mikkelsen and Christoph Waltz. And James Corden, which is not great, but he is shat on the whole entire time. Everyone just tells him to fuck off. And I'm like, I'm here for that. So this film was a film I loved in my youth. It came out when I was in my teens, and I was was I 13 when it came out, roughly? So, peak time for this movie. I've had the Blu-ray ever since then, actually, because we watched it in the cinema, and I was fucking head over heels for it. Hot off the tail of Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, kicking right into steampunk. Perfect time for me. I love... this isn't really a big steampunky kind of film, realistically. It's just what if Leonardo da Vinci made airships. So it's not really steampunk, but it kind of has that aesthetic to it. The period costumes look nice. The action scenes are decently shot, having seen the 2024 D'Artagnan film, which I was not a fan of. I didn't like how that one was shot. This one I think is shot better, but I think that one is probably a better film, but I was more ho-hum on this one, which is still just a bunch of British people playing French people. I love it. love to see it when the British people are the bad guys and they're British people who are playing French people and they're against British people playing British people. It's fucking hilarious. What a dumb movie. It is fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's the kind of movie where I'm like, this of all of Anderson's films, I think is the easiest one to get into. Like, it's made for a very general audience, made for mass consumption. Anyone could watch it. I mean, this and maybe Pompeii. I think Pompeii is probably the better one to go with. But this one's just fun, swashbuckling adventure. Got some mystery, got some political intrigue, got some comedy, got this, you got that, got some romance, got some fight scenes. You know, you got everything there for you. Again, Pirates of the Caribbean-esque stuff. It lacks a really fun character to get behind. Like, the musketeers are fine and D'Artagnan is fine, but none of them have the charisma. Like, again, you think pirates, you think of Johnny Depp's version of course, well, not even version, just fucking Jack Sparrow. That's what makes that franchise. It's not the side characters. They're there for the story. He's just there for fun. And no one's really here for fun in Three Musketeers. Not even the audience, realistically. Like, I still enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I still think it's fun now. It's just a big adventure film. Which works. The problem is, it doesn't end. It's one of those classic films that it just doesn't have an ending. They kind of vaguely wrap up the story. They do, to a degree. They still get their mission done, you know, because at least if they had a sequel, it would have had its own story, its own focus point. But this one was like, oh, yeah, this one's done. One and done. It's all good. We've written it off. And what's that? We're setting up for a sequel where this big-ass fucking boat and flying boat army by Orlando Bloom is meant to come from England and fight the French. Gee whiz, I hope that movie happens. It doesn't exist. It's gone. Kaput. I don't know why it doesn't exist. I imagine this movie probably didn't perform well. I mean, it might have gotten its money back, but it probably didn't do well review-wise, and I imagine for that reason the studio was like, well, let's move on. Let's just sweep it under the rug. There's so many Three Musketeers films. Everyone's gonna shit on it because it's too much like the others and not enough original stuff, and even the original stuff is just, why are they flying in airships? I don't know, because we have CGI now. Which, again, at least I can give credit to Anderson. He still has a good visual eye. There's not really a lot of effects in this movie that look bad, except for in the last act where it's airship against airship, and it's very clear that they're on a green screen. It just doesn't look great. It's also that kind of mentality of, if they're on a big airship in the air and they're talking to each other, how can they hear each other? Because it's really loud up when you go up in the air. It's loud because there's wind. This movie doesn't account for wind at all. Anyway, it's fine. It's a pretty fun adventure film. That's really all you can get out of it. I think Anderson's fine in the directing chair. I'm glad he didn't write it, but also Miller's in it, and she's fine. So, yeah, it's just an okay movie overall. It's nothing amazing, nothing to write home about, forgettable realistically, but also, I don't know, rewatching, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of exactly what I remember. It's always, most of these Three Musketeers films are the same narrative anyway, so you're not really missing much if you haven't seen it before. Pompeii from 2014 is actually good. What the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. Complain all you want about a natural disaster ruining a pretty fun gladiator film, but when it all is said and done, it's a pretty spectacular natural disaster. Rip to all those who died so that Kit Harington could make out with Violet Baudelaire. Gone but not forgotten. Or really, not even gone, just in the British Museum. This film was pretty fun. I was surprised by it. The first, it's like 100 minutes. And, the first hour is basically like, oh, this is just like a gladiator drama film. And, the gladiator is in love with, becomes in love with, the rich girl, being played by someone Browning. Emily Browning. No. I think that's right, actually, because she's the Australian girl. Like I said, Violet Baudelaire. I've watched movies. Yes, Emily Browning. She plays Cassia. And Kit Harington, who is the whole time referred to as just Gladiator, reveals his name's Milo near the end, which is a bad name. I mean, it's okay, I guess. It's not great. It is 100 minutes, right? 105. So yeah, the first hour is just a drama about regular politics in Rome interfering with the politics in Pompeii. And just that stuff. It's like an episode of Spartacus. It's like an episode of fucking Game of Thrones, just with a lot less nudity and sex. In fact, zero of both of those. A lot of violence, though. Gotta love the violence. If you like the movie Gladiator, this is like that, except shorter, and has a fucking volcano that explodes, because the whole final act is like, hey, we're in the Gladiator match, and Kit Harington has to fight the bad guy, and what the fuck, there's a volcano and it's exploding, holy shit, and that's the rest of the movie, is just volcano explosions and how they deal with that, and it is fucking mental. It is just, if the rest of the movie was boring as shit, this is a 5-star masterpiece. The whole fucking last act is just insane. If it's even the last act, it's like the whole second half of the movie. And to be fair, I like the characters. I like the romance. I think it's fine. I think it works well enough for what it's going for. Like, it gives you just enough to give a shit that you're not thinking, these people are all going to die. Because I don't know if they're all going to fucking die. I don't know how they're going to die. Are they going to deserve to die? I don't know. I need to care about these characters. And look at this. I fucking care about these characters. I thought it was good. I gave it 4 stars. I'm like, this film actually fucking slaps. I don't understand how good this film is. Not to mention the fact that Anderson directs the shit out of the fucking destruction sequences. Like, he's able to make it work so well because, again, he has such a really interesting eye for visual effects that he can just make it blend really fucking seamlessly, and I love that. Like, you can always say so much shit about Anderson's films because his characters are poorly written, or his direction is just awful, or whatever the fuck. Like, it's just mindless films for mindless people. It's like, this isn't Fast and the Furious. This has... He's got some style, even though I do like the Fast and Furious films. Man, I am a man of taste. And so... it's just one of those things where you can actually watch his films and sometimes be like, fuck, these films slap. I mean, we've talked about Resident Evil. Have we talked about the Resident Evil film yet? I'm filming this in the wrong order, just in case you haven't noticed. Did he direct? He wrote and he didn't write the film. It has 3 writers: Janet Scott Batchelor, Lee Batchelor, and Michael Robert Johnson. So, wow, from the writer of Batman Forever, holy shit, and the writer of Sherlock Holmes and Mute. I've seen Mute. Mute was bad. Man, that's crazy. From the fucking writers, plural, of Batman Forever. That is not on the tagline. Imagine that on the poster. From the writers of Batman Forever. Everyone's favorite Batman film. I actually like Batman Forever. It's the weakest of them, but I like it. We've done Retribution. We've done in my mind, his greatest film. With Resident Evil Retribution, and this is a pretty solid follow-up. Like, I don't know, he just has a hell of an eye, and it makes me question if he really is that bad of a director, or if he just knows what he's doing. I think he's better when he's directing other people's scripts, for the most part, because by this stage, usually his better films are the ones where he's just the director and someone else has written it. So someone else has thought. They have thoughts in their brain and write it on a piece of paper instead of just, my sexy wife fights demons and zombies. What's that, $100 million for a budget? Fuck yeah. Like, instead of that, like, I'll criticize as much as I want to for the Resident Evil films. I fucking love them. So, you know, I just also have a critical eye for these things. So, Pompeii's really fun. It's a great disaster film. It's a really fun gladiator film. It's really interestingly shot. The action's pretty good. In general, I think it's a really solid film. I'm surprised that people don't like it as much, but again, I think just because of the reputation that Anderson has, that, again, with some of these movies, yeah, I can fucking see why. You know, sometimes he makes a banger. I'll give him that. So, let's move on to the next one, the next one. Monster Hunter from 2020. Holy mother of mackerel. This film, I think I liked it more the first time around. First time around, I watched it in 2020 when it came out. It was one of the only films I saw in cinema that year. January of 2020, 2021. Holy shit. It actually came out in 2021 in Australia. I think it came out the real tail end of 2020 in the US. And even back in 2021, I gave it 2.5 stars initially. I gave it 2 stars this time around. I liked it last time because I was like, it's Enemy Mine, but stupider. And also big monsters, which look cool. I like the big monsters. I'm a big fan of big monsters. It's one of the better things of CGI, is that big monsters fucking big. So I'll give it that. However, there's some noteworthy things. Firstly, I'm not a fan of the games. Never played them, have no interest in them whatsoever. Watching the behind-the-scenes features and seeing how Anderson is like, I love these fucking video games, and Miller, who is not even, I don't even know how to pronounce her name half the goddamn time, because he says it at one stage, I'm like, I don't even know if I can replicate what he just said. It's like, I don't even know, like, it's almost like her name is Mia, like the L's are silent. Hell of a name. Anyway, she even says how he was a huge fan of the games, and so much so that they got the rights to actually make, a live-action adaptation. And by the looks of it, from the footage that they show of the game, and by his explanation of you just go around killing big monsters, I'm like, yeah, I guess it's a pretty accurate representation of the game. But I don't also think that, because I'm like, I feel like there are people who've played these games who are definitely going to disagree, and who are going to be like, Julian, no, Monster Hunter is nothing fucking like the movie. The movie's stupid and bad. And I agree with you on several of those fronts. The movie is stupid and bad. I think it's boring because it has no plot. The characters are not interesting. It takes the dullest route of getting from what is a fun opening sequence to the rest of the movie, where, now we're following Mila, or Mia, or whatever her actual name is, and her character, she has a character name, let me note it down for you, Artemis. Good God. What a fucking... She's Ukrainian, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, anyway, bad movie. So Artemis is a military person, and she's on a mission with a bunch of other people who you are meant to care about. Remember? Caring about characters? Wow, that was a long time ago. And they're in the desert looking for Bravo team, was it? Or they're looking for the Alpha team, and they're the Bravo team, or they're the Alpha team and they're looking for the Bravo team, one of the two, and they follow the tracks that leads to nowhere, but there's a bunch of runes, and then suddenly a portal opens up, and they all get traversed into a different dimension where it's just sand dunes and giant monsters, and they all fucking die to one monster, except for her. Actually, they don't all die to one monster. They all die, most of them, 90% of them die to one big monster. The rest of them happen to get onto the rocks, where the hunter, the other character in the movie, again, Enemy Mine, which if you haven't seen is basically Dennis Quaid and a alien that doesn't speak the same language as him, who's his opposition, literally they're in a war against each other, land on the same planet, have to become friends. The alien has a child, which is fucking crazy, but they have a different kind of breeding species where they're all men and women at the same time. Hermaphrodite aliens, and he takes care of the baby. The dad dies, and then there's also a weird mine that they go to, and they have to save a bunch of people from a mine, or it's a prison camp or something. I don't know. Not a bad film. Very strange final act, that's for sure. This movie, on the other hand, doesn't have a story, remember? It's just, here's a bunch of monsters, you have to keep fighting them, but also you suck, so you're going to keep dying. So everyone fucking dies. There's a bunch of spider monsters, they kill her friends. And if they don't, they put them in a nest, and then they explode out of the throat of one of the guys. And the waist, or not the throat, but it still kills him. A lot of big spider monsters. And they spend so much of the movie just trying to kill one spider monster so they can get its venom, just so that it can shoot a venomous, tooth, fang, into the big monster that they've been dealing with the whole fucking time, for them to then walk across the desert, find an oasis. The oasis is where the hunter's friends all are, one of whom happens to be Ron fucking Perlman, and then they're like, hey, there's a tower over there. We gotta destroy the tower because it's creating these dimensional portals. So they go to the tower, fight a big dragon, get thrown into the human dimension, fight the big dragon again, but with the help of the military. The military die because there's a fucking dragon, and then suddenly it cuts to a green screen sequence where Mila Jovovich has killed the big monster, but her friends are there now, the hunter and Ron Perlman's character, and now out of the portal comes a brand new character, brand new monster. They gotta fight that. And then cut to the mid-credit scene where there's another character who's a hooded, cloaked figure, and also the cat person is still there. There's no plot. That's the movie. Like, it's stupid. It is ridiculous, and I cannot believe I have this on fucking 4K. I mean, it still looks pretty, but it's too dumb, and it's just too uneventful. And I'm flabbergasted that this is just what the movie is. Like, I don't understand how Anderson could see the games and be like, isn't it fun to just walk around and kill a bunch of monsters? I don't know if there's a story in those games, because if there fucking is, this movie does not tell you a story. And then it's just like, what if my wife fought these monsters with the help of a guy who's good at martial arts, but we're going to cut out most of his martial arts? Hey, Hollywood's filmmaking. So I'm not big on the film, let's put it that way. I just can't find many redeeming aspects to it. Some of the performances are okay, and the effects look great, but outside of that, it's just like, man, I think everyone who Paul W.S. Anderson has ever met is just stupid. And I'm pretty sure he wrote the fucking screenplay. Yes, he did. He wrote it by himself. And he directed it. Yeah. And he co-produced it with Jeremy Bolt, who produced, like, most of his films. Yeah. Fuck, what a dumb fucking movie. Anyway, on to our next flick. Last but not least, we have In the Lost Lands from 2025, based on a George R.R. Martin short story from, like, the 80s? Anyway, that was actually an interesting thing when that popped up in the credits, and I was like, oh, okay. I kind of wish I knew that to begin with. Like, I kind of wish that was in the opening credits, like, based on a story by George R.R. Martin. I'd be like, oh, okay, so it's that kind of level of fucked up fantasy, maybe? I don't know. Nevertheless, this film was interesting to say the least. I gladly was finally able to watch it in cinemas, because despite the fact that it had no advertising that I ever saw, I never saw a poster for it. I don't even know how I knew about it, to be honest. I think I was just at Hoyt's one time, and I just saw it there in the Lost Lands. I'm thinking, the hell is that, a Mila Jovovich film? And I'm thinking, that's weird. She only acts in films by his, husband. And lo and behold, it is a Paul W.S. Anderson film. It's with Mila and Dave Bautista. And it was at Hoyt's, the kind of that and Village of the main kind of cinema chain in Australia. And it was at Hoyt's for like a week, and then it was gone. And it wasn't getting the big release. And so I had to go to Reading Cinema. It's written as Reading, but it's Reading. And that's like a much smaller chain cinema, to the point that it's $10 tickets, which is fucking nice. So I went to one of those, which wasn't too far away, which was great. There wasn't anyone else there. There was one guy in the cinema with me, who was right at the back. About half an hour in, he left, and he didn't come back. So I don't think he bought a ticket. I think he was gone from cinema to cinema, because who's going to really give a shit and tell? And he didn't give a shit after half an hour, and he just left. Yeah, or maybe he left at the, because sometimes you can get refunds if you leave before like a certain period of time. Maybe he had a timer set, and he's just like, "Nope, this movie sucks. I'm leaving," and he got his money back. But when I bought the ticket at the front, there was no other ticket sold, and when I walked in there, he was already in there. So I don't think he bought a ticket. So it doesn't really matter. It's not great. It's okay. Like, I gave it 2.5 stars. It's one of those films that, because Anderson hasn't really changed his direction or style in the last 20-odd years, like, to a degree, they're all video game-esque films, especially since Mortal Kombat, that there's, like, pros and cons about it. The con would be that Mila Jovovich doesn't emote in the film, and there's not really any reason why she doesn't. She's meant to care about Dave Bautista's character by one stage in the film, and I'm like, I don't think she does. Like, the dialogue says that she does, but her acting doesn't say shit. Like, I feel like she knows by this stage that she can just do whatever in her husband's films, and it doesn't matter, because they're going to make bank anyway. And I don't know how. I don't know who's watching this stuff anymore. Like, I'm pretty sure this is one of those classic, flops of his. I'm pretty sure Monster Hunter was as well. And I'm like, who's watching these films now? Like, he has a fan base, sure. I guess I'm one of them. But what the fuck is going on? Like, I have my props to him that after watching so many of his films in the past week and a bit, that I respect certain elements to his filmography. I think this is a very easy film of his to watch. Like, in contrast to something like Resident Evil The Final Chapter, where it's choppy as shit and gives you a migraine. This one doesn't. It's story is relatively fine of a witch who's played by Miller is tasked by a queen and then by her friend to find a shapeshifter who's a werewolf and to bring back his skin to make her, the queen, into a werewolf or a shapeshifter. You don't know why at the time, but it's pretty obvious that Dave Bautista's character is in fact that werewolf. It's the twist of the movie, but who really gives a shit? And so she hires, Dave Bautista because she has a vision. Oh, wow, she's a witch. To see what this werewolf does, and she just watches a whole sequence for a vision, which is hilarious. And it cuts away just before she sees the reflection of the werewolf turn into a human again, which is actually just, oh, no, she did see the rest of that vision, but the film neglected to tell you that until the end of the film where it was revealed. And I'm like, yeah, cool, all right, whatever. I'm not here for an interesting story, I'm here for a time. And so she knows it's Bautista to find, so she goes and finds him, because it's not like a miraculous, why does she find him? Like, you'd be asking those questions, but it's like, no, she just knows, because she's fucking seen this in a vision. And she travels with him through the Lost Lands, and it shows you a map of all the locations that they're going to go to. I'm like, all that in 6 days? Are you sure? Even Bautista's character is like, oh, it's going to take us a couple days to get there. It's going to take us maybe a week and a bit. And she's like, yeah, we got to get there in 6 days, otherwise nothing will change. But I just promised that I'd get it done in 7 days, because I'm an idiot. And so they go to different locations. We see some of Bautista's friends. Then we go to other locations, which are just really interestingly generated locations, which I say that because apparently most of this film was rendered in Unreal Engine, which is crazy. Like, not a lot of it's CGI. A lot of it is. I mean, it's all fucking CGI when you really think about it. There's enough locations in it that most of the time I couldn't actually tell if it was practical or not, but for the most part, it looked very practical outside of the obvious, visual effects that were like smoke and fire and obvious CGI creatures and certain other big, too large for their own kind of game sequences. There's enough stuff here where it's actually set in enough of a real location that I still like, that's cool. They're still wearing actual costumes and stuff. They're not wearing mocap suits and pretending to have CGI costumes in post. They're, wearing stupid costumes, like a cowboy hat, and she's got a bunch of tattoos on her face that mean nothing, because they don't explain their fucking backstories. Even the one time Bautista's character does, it was all a joke. It wasn't actually him, because he admits he doesn't cry, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? It's a film that is a weird commentary on, I guess, masculinity, because they keep referring to men as being toxic people, but the one person who isn't toxic happens to be a fucking werewolf. I don't know, sure, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It's weird, because it's like, yeah, sure, I guess every single guy is a dickhead in the film, but so is every other character. Like, everyone's an asshole, except for Bautista. But he's a fucking werewolf, so I guess maybe the person was right. They just didn't want to include that every other woman is also an asshole, because then you'd be sexist. So yeah, mind you, Anderson did write this film as well as directed. And so, yeah, they go for the locations, get to the werewolf place, find out, of course, he's the werewolf, and then other stuff happens. I'm not going to really explain the conclusion of the film because it doesn't really matter, but I will say that there's a variety of villains in the film, which I did like. There's this, like, society, because this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, so they have guns, but they also have witchcraft and werewolves and demons and, like, steam trains. So it's very weird. It's a crazy amalgamation of just a whole bunch of shit, and I'm like, I kind of respect that, because if anything, Anderson is the only fucking person who really wants to do that kind of shit now. Like, I like that. I'm like, that's cool. He's just doing this shit. Visually, he's got a distinct style. It doesn't look, like, really ugly. Like, at times it actually, it looks quite nice. It has a consistent visual style to itself. There's a whole black and white sequence at one stage where you first see the werewolf fight, and that's pretty cool. There's, like, enough nice visuals, even with the Unreal Engine stuff, because it doesn't ultimately look very fake, because at the same time it is a futuristic dead world, because it's all been fucking nuked to hell after some vague war kind of bullshit. But there's, like, the only city that seems to survive is a city that's underground. The city under the city. So it's not actually underground, but they're just digging a big hole. Why? I don't know. Just slavery, I guess, because it's just ruled by a dictator overlord called the Overlord. and he's dying, but his queen wants to have sex with Dave Bautista again because she's been having sex with him on the side, because of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Everyone seems to be having sex with Dave Bautista in this movie, which, sure, why not? Except for Miller, which is interesting. But they imply that they want to do that. And there's a religious cult who are supporting the Overlord, but also want to, like, are waiting for him to die so they can, like, take over. It's kind of very Three Musketeers in that kind of narrative sense. Because the real people who have the power are this religious cult, basically. And the people follow the religious cult like the slaves because they have no choice, because they're slaves. And yeah, I will admit that there's some fun visuals in it, because the witch uses, like, it looks at people's eyes to control them and whatever, which she uses illusions. That's her magic, is to create illusions, which is pretty fun. You get some nice action scenes out of that, especially. There's a whole action scene where the bad guys are wearing sunglasses, just aviators, just reflective fucking aviators, which gives you some nice visuals when you can see the characters, like, reflecting. It's pretty fun. But, like, just so they don't get under the spell of the witch, which is really funny to me. I'm like, why didn't they just do that to begin with? They start the movie by trying to hang the bitch, and then they're like, oh, look, she bewitched a guy because we walked away while she was being hung, because, of course, that's what you do. Hanged? Anyway, and so, so much stupid shit. But at the same time, look, I like the religious cult. They're the bad guys, realistically. But then I think everyone's the bad guy. There's no real good character in this fucking movie except for Batista's character. I don't even know if he's the main character. He tells the story, but he's telling it to Mila Jovovich, who experienced all of this. So I'm like, why is this happening? Fucking narrative devices are so stupid in this movie. So again, there's a reason I give it 2.5 stars. As much as I appreciate his visual flair, I like the action. But there's still, like, I enjoy some of the characters. I like, again, the bad guys, the religious cult at least, because they wear stupid clothes and they look hilarious, and also they just very up their own ass, and I kind of like that about them. Dave Bautista has a 2-headed snake at one stage that gets decapitated because that just fucking happens. There's so much to say about this fucking movie. It's crazy. Okay, my last real criticism would be that there is a scene with a train, and they're on a train track, like the Batista and Jovovich are they're on a train track on horses, and they can hear the train coming because it's coming at full power. So suddenly it cuts to Mila is just on the track by herself, and the train's coming, and they're like, great, she's there, let's pump this up. And she turns around and runs, like, oh no, I'm scared, I have to run. And I'm like thinking, well, this is in slow motion, they're going super fucking fast, she's either going to die, or this is an illusion. And of course she ends up running and jumping because the train track actually ends in the middle of a cliff. So the train derails and goes off, and all those people die, and she jumps off and gets caught by Batista. And now you're probably thinking, okay, that sounds a bit dramatic. And yeah, visually it is. It's all in slow motion. It's very stupid because I'm like, this is an illusion, right? But how could it be as well? She's not looking into the eyes of any of the people on the train, so how would the illusion perpetuate? So obviously it's not an illusion, and she's just able to outrun a train for like half a kilometer when the train's going full fucking speed, even more so because they are trying to rush to get the Miller and whatever. So I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's a sequence like that where it goes for high intense visuals, and it's stupid as shit, and it's a kind of visual that I would appreciate for the concept of a train derailment and then one of the main villains dying, and I'm like, that'd be cool to watch if it was done in a better way, and it just isn't. So a lot of this film is kind of like that, where it would be cool to watch if it was just done in a better way. Yeah, there's a whole scene where they're in a nuclear silo fighting demons with imaginary fire, so it's like, yeah, there are definitely elements to it where it's like, I don't know how much longer fucking Anderson can pull this stuff off, because he as much as I appreciate his visual style and the fact that he actually has the chutzpah to fucking do something like this and to get the money to do it, even though he's had the same producer for his whole career, Jeremy Bolt, I don't know how he's going to afford to keep making movies like this. It doesn't make any sense to me, even though most of the production crew seem to be from, I think, the Czech Republic. Yeah. This movie was definitely not made in the UK or made in America. Clearly, it was made in a European country. So, maybe that's good for their finances, sure, like people coming to Australia to film, special effects films, like the Marvel movies and whatever. That's nice for the industry, so I'll give it that. He's supporting other industries like that, but maybe it's also shit, this is all I can do now. I have to go to these industries to try and get this to work, and that's why they're also using Unreal Engine 5, because maybe those people are just much better at using Unreal Engine 5. I don't know. I'd like to see the Blu-ray of this to see any special features of Anderson talking about it. That would be very, very interesting. Moving on. So, in the end, I've watched 17 films by Paul W.S. Anderson. I can't actually say I've watched 100% on Letterboxd because it's 93. There's one more film, which is the House of the Dead remake or live-action version that he's doing. With Miller, of course. Look, there's pluses and minuses I will give to Anderson's filmography. I enjoy his films. Like, hands down, I still enjoy his films. Sure, I do think that at least half of them are fucking awful. There's at least a quirk or a charm to some of them that I really like. As a video game adaptation guy, he does a decent job to some degree, and that seems like a fucked up thing to say, realistically. Like, you look at Mortal Kombat, you look at Monster Hunter, look at Resident Evil, and none of them really represent what the games are, except that they do. Mortal Kombat is about a fighting tournament with all these crazy characters. It just now has a narrative. And again, this is 90s Mortal Kombat, where it didn't really have a narrative. So there's that. Then you get Resident Evil, which starts with the first film as a prequel to the games, and then starts adding video game characters and the lore of the universe with Raccoon City and everything. Is it meant to be a direct adaptation of the games? No, it just puts in some of the characters and some of the locations and some of the lingo and the creatures and the terminology and all this stuff. It's mostly dictated by Capcom as to where the direction of each film goes, and Anderson just has to write it towards that scale. And that's basically what they did. It's not a series I blame Anderson for its strange narrative choices and how it poorly goes in this direction or that direction. But at the same time, he wrote every single one of those films. He directed, 60% of them, the first, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And whilst I don't like the sixth one, at least the rest of them are enjoyable to watch. They've got some charm to them. I love the fifth one. So, yeah, I'm starting to love the fourth one a lot more as well, which is really good. That one I quite like. I'm surprised by that. But yeah, it's just, he has a style to his films. And again, Monster Hunter is accurate to the games. I don't think it's a good movie, but at least as an adaptation, it's pretty accurate. It just now has a bit of story in it. And the story ain't that great to begin with. Yeah. Do I think he's let down since the final chapter has come out for Resident Evil? I think so, personally. I don't like the final chapter. I don't like Monster Hunter. I don't mind In the Lost Lands. I can give that at least a bit of a... I might enjoy this a lot more on rewatch especially, because I didn't mind it the first time. I didn't hate it. Like, I'm not actively watching these because I hate them. That doesn't seem right to me. If I was hate watching these movies, you would have known about it by now. But let's look at the ranked list from worst to first. What do I think in the 17 films he's done? We start with, of course, Resident Evil, the final chapter. I gave it 1 star. There's nothing I like about this film except for some of the visual effects look nice. There's at least one decent set piece that becomes really stupid very quickly, and that's the one where the bad guys are coming towards them in the tower, and they're like got all these things to stop the bad guys, but then there's one human, and they're like, oh, I have to be the good guy, so let's let the human in, even though they're gonna get shot and killed anyway. It's stupid. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stupid shit in this movie. But I hate the editing, don't care for the story, I hate the opening, I like the ending, but I hate everything in between. I just dislike the movie so much, especially because the fifth one had ended with such an interesting, direct premise for the next film that even most of the other films had done. Basically, every single one of these films had at least an ending that would correlate immediately into the next. The first one did, the third one did, where she finds all the clones. Where it went was up to the narrative, but at least you knew she's got all these clones. And then the fourth one, led into the next one, with all the planes coming to the ship. Not planes, all the helicopters coming to the big ship. And then the fifth one was like, hey, we're at the White House, we've got all these undead to fight, and then we don't have the budget to do it, so we're just not going to do that, which sucks. $40 million budget. Those movies were bankable. Really, really bankable. They did so fucking well at the box office. It's insane. Each one, like, surpassed the next. It was crazy. But nevertheless, not a big fan of the final chapter. Then we have Monster Hunter from 2020, which I gave 2 stars. This one, despite the fact that I like the visual effects, again, that's my big praise to Anderson. He does good visual effects. He knows how to integrate it well with the style and the characters fighting. And I like the big monsters. I just don't care for the characters in the story. It doesn't have any of that. The characters have no character and the story has no story. I don't like it. It's not my thing. Then we have Resident Evil Apocalypse, which I do give a 1.5 stars because I think it's a lot worse of a film than Monster Hunter, but I think it's more entertaining than Monster Hunter. So, again, he wrote it, didn't direct it, but yeah, I think it's funnier. I think it's more entertaining. And I think that's kind of where you want to go with his films, if they're entertaining or not. And so far, this is the first entertaining one. Then we get to The Sight, which I gave 3 stars. I think it's fine on its own. Again, failed TV pilot, but it's entertaining. Like, I can't write home about it. Like, it's not fantastic, but it's watchable. The characters are interesting enough. The story is interesting enough. Everything about it is interesting enough for what it is, but not enough to see a future of the show. Even though the basically before the credits scene does hint at something big, but again, because it's a TV show, it never happened. Then you have Mortal Kombat from 95. I gave this 2 stars. And again, as much as again I rated it lower than The Sight, it is a lot more iconic. It's got a fantastic theme. The production design is fantastic. It just has bad visual effects, bad fight scenes, except for probably the one with Scorpion, and not very interesting characters. They start interesting and get gradually worse and more boring by the end of the movie. There are some weird casting choices. Some of them are iconically bad, like Christopher Lambert as Raiden. It's fucking hilarious. Not just because he's cast as Raiden, but also that he speaks in the way that he speaks. Stupid, but I love it. I still don't like this film, but I'm kind of, I don't know, get me drunk with the right people, I will have a fucking fun time with this movie. So, yeah, but that's not happening anytime soon. A lot of people love it for its nostalgia kick, which is perfectly fine. Then you have In the Lost Lands, which I think is fine on its own. It has a decent enough story. I don't think the characters, at least the main character, Milla Jovovich, is not that interesting, but I do like Dave Bautista's character. It is basically his story, but she's just the leading person for some reason. Not just because it's, Anderson's wife, but, it's one of those things like a Harry Potter thing where it's like, she's technically the main character, but everyone else is the interesting one, but it's like, yeah, sure, I guess, but she could have at least acted, because she doesn't look like she acts in that movie at all, which is not great. But visually it's interesting. It looks like a video game because it was made in Unreal Engine, which is crazy. But yeah, I don't know. If this is the direction that Anderson's going to go in for his films, I'm not against them. I'm happy with a cinematic experience at least. Like, no one fucking watched this movie. It didn't do well at all. But I'll buy the 4K when it comes out. Hopefully. Then we have AVP, Alien vs. Predator, which I gave 2.5 stars. Again, I enjoy it enough as a film by itself, but it is too much of a PG version of Alien and Predator, which is bad on both fronts for 2 movie series that to that point especially, have been quite violent. Aggressively so, to a lot of a degree. And whilst I enjoy the concept and some of the main human characters, or just that one main human character, and that one predator, the rest of it's not that interesting to me. It's very boring very quickly. It tries too hard to also be part of the Alien canon, which I'm like, don't do that. That's stupid. Because it's not part of the Alien canon. It's stupid. Anyway. Then you have Death Race from 2008. Again, 3 stars, enjoyable Jason Statham schlock, which is probably the best you can get out of it. Not a great remake, because the original one is far superior in concept and just general fun and character, but this one is okay. Again, I don't like how the cars just look, the brown grey look of the whole film with the color grading ruins the visual experience of trying to understand which car is which sucks. And the editing is very ferocious in those car chases. But aside from that, it's still okay. It's got some fun characters, got some good actors to it, so it's got pluses and minuses. They all do. I mean, hell, the next one's the Three Musketeers, which, again, has pluses and minuses. I enjoy its kind of steampunky vibe and kind of its outrageousness to its own narrative. I don't think the cast is overtly interesting. I think it's really funny how they have that one guy who I fucking hate. What was his name? James Corden. Because the film actively is just doing this to him the whole time, which is really great. So I appreciate that. Miller's pretty hot in it. I'll give him that. He knows how to shoot his wife and to make her look hot. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm down for that. The sword fights are interesting. The flying ships are a choice. I like it, but it's fine. Then we have Resident Evil Extinction, which, again, it's tricky to say. A lot of these are very on the same kind of bar, but at least this one has that one great set piece with the crows, which, despite not really mentioning it too much in my actual individual review for it, it has at least that big set piece. It's got some interesting characters. I think it's fun enough on its own right. It's trickier to say because I feel like maybe it's probably weaker than Death Race and the Three Musketeers, but I find it to be a bit more interesting because by this stage I actually like these characters to some degree. It has a very, very thin plot, but I kind of think that works for itself. It has this good Mad Max vibe. The Vegas strip scene is pretty good. I don't know. It's just a chapter in the middle of a story. It's hard to really pin it as something other than that, because that's just what it feels like. A chapter in a video game, because it is. It's the desert level of a video game. Think of, any Mario game where you have the sand world. It's just that. You know, it doesn't start the narrative, it doesn't end the narrative, it's just a continual journey, and just some high points and some low points in between. Then you have Soldier from 98, which I still really enjoy it enough as its own. It's a interesting kind of Rambo-ish ripoff, but I think Kurt Russell's pretty interesting in the role. It has a very interesting narrative device, interesting visual language to it as well. I think I like how everything's set up nicely in the middle act to pay off properly in the end. It being a Blade Runner film is a choice. There's a lot of interesting things about it. I think it's worth watching. I don't think it's worth throwing underneath the bus just because it's a harder to access kind of Anderson film. Because I'm like, no, it's not bad. I think it's enjoyable. Then we have Shopping from 94, which I gave 3.5 stars. And Shopping itself is, I would like to watch it in a higher quality format. I think it's just a more interesting film because it just has a better undertaking narratively. It's so much easier to get into than most of Anderson's filmography. Outside of, again, probably the first Resident Evil, if you even like horror action, or, Three Musketeers. A lot of these films aren't so, and Pompeii, a lot of these films aren't easy to just access immediately in terms of, understanding what the fuck they're going for. So yeah, but at least Shopping has an interesting style to it. Again, a good cast, interesting soundtrack. It's just a better than average general film in my mind, but it's still pretty average realistically. Just a good indie film in its own right, with a decent enough tragic ending. Then you have Resident Evil from 2002, which I get 3 stars. That one I just enjoy more. It has some fun characters, some iconic set pieces, some stupid shit, your regular stuff. Then you have Resident Evil Afterlife, which I gave 3.5 stars. This one, again, visually becomes much more impressive. He's getting his style properly together, especially for this series. And you can see, there's too many low points of just nothing happening. Why is she flying around vlogging? I don't fucking care. I know why she's doing it, but it's just not that interesting. But once the first opening set piece happens and you get basically to the prison, the rest of the film is fucking banger. It's just, there's a solid chunk in the first act before you get to the second act that is just not interesting. But the rest of it's great. So, Claire is wasted in that movie, but it's fine. She has memory loss, whatever. Then at number 3, we have Event Horizon. Again, 3.5 stars. This one I enjoyed a lot more this time than the first time, obviously. And I'm starting to enjoy it a lot more as time goes on. I think it has a very obvious lasting legacy that of Anderson's films is his most well-known. Realistically, a lot of people know the Resident Evil films, but a lot of people associate them with being bad, as bad video game adaptations, as bad movies. But with Event Horizon, it just feels like the movie that almost could. You know, it feels like an incomplete masterpiece kind of thing. And sure, if we got a longer cut, which will never happen, but if we had a fuller vision of it, maybe I could appreciate more to it. Because every once in a while, I'll think about it and think, do I want more Hell Dimension stuff? Do I want less Hell Dimension stuff? I don't know. Because what I have to deal with in the end is what I get. And what I get, I'm actually surprisingly happy with, despite the fact that the first time I watched it, I was not happy with it. So it's growing on me, and I'm all for it. It's very interesting. Again, nice production design, interesting characters, a good soundtrack. It's a interesting film overall. Then we have Pompeii from 2014, which I gave 4 stars. Fucking love it. You know, it's got some fun characters, some interesting like geopolitical stuff, a good gladiator whole section, which is great because that's what it is. It's the politics of Pompeii right before Vesuvius erupts, and of course, just as we're getting really, really, really cooking into the big fight between like the main character and the main bad guy, or the main bad guy's number one guy, the volcano blows up, and then it's just the craziest visual feast of just utter destruction you'll ever see. So I think that one's really fun. That one would be wonderful to watch in the cinema. They should bring it back. It would be amazing, because visually it is just fucking insane. Yeah, I don't know. This one is one of my favorites of his, clearly. And probably his best film, I think, as a standalone anything, just easily his best film. I know a lot of people would say it would be Event Horizon, and I know number one, of course, is Resident Evil Retribution, but I think that Pompeii is like his most easy, normal, really emotionally well put together film, because in contrast to Retribution, like, I don't know, there's just so many elements that I really, really love in Pompeii, and Retribution I fucking adore. Retribution, the 5-star movie, I absolutely love it, because it knows what the fuck it is. It's just ultimate popcorn cinema, and I really like how it just explores that. It's like, hey, these are all based on video games. What if we get everyone's favorite characters, add a few more, put them in this location that's just an underground layer of like simulation upon simulation upon simulation. They have to fight different categories of people, of different villains from previous films, and more impressive villains from previous films. And then a big boss battle at the end. Not exactly a big boss battle, but like just a fun one. You know, Michelle Rodriguez becomes super powered. You have to fight Jill Valentine, who's also super powered. There's zombies under the ice. There are so many fun elements to this film. It's just a fucking ride. Like, none of it seems too dumb that you think is incomprehensible. Like, take with Afterlife again, where characters will, in a straight ship, appear behind someone when the only door is behind the main character, and they're over there somehow. I don't know how. Geography doesn't make any fucking sense in these movies sometimes. But at least this film, I can't really nitpick it for anything like that, because even if it does do anything really stupid, which, in my mind, it doesn't, it's just bizarre. Like, the only really stupid thing is just Mila Jovovich leaves her adoptive daughter with a clone of a dead kind of person that she knew once, for like 5 minutes to go steal a car that has special rimmers to it, only to crash into a giant zombie monster, save a bunch of guys, almost get killed, and then get back down to the subway station. It's hilarious. It's just a side quest she has to do, and I love it. It's the most video game a movie has ever video gamed, and I really like that element. For a filmmaker who emphasizes his career on basically doing video game adaptations, this one is the pinnacle of his video game adaptations. It's the least accurate to the fucking games. I don't care. If you want accuracy, look at fucking Monster Hunter, and I think that movie sucks. So I'm obviously not going for video game accuracy here. I'm just going for what the fuck is fun, and I think Resident Evil is a fucking fun blast of a movie. You can switch your brain off and enjoy the shit out of it, but you can also look at it, like you should with all the Resident Evil films, as they are a deconstruction of just the tyranny of capitalism and how it doesn't care about you, it just wants to mass produce everything and also kill it at the same time. What was it that my mate Guy said about it? Because he had a really good take when he mentioned for the final chapter. I'm going to steal from his review. The Umbrella Corporation wants to create a new society from the ground up, but their worldview still couldn't think past stocks and shareholders. LeMayo, these movies fucking rule. Because they are. as much as you can hate the movies for being bad adaptations of video games, they fucking understand what Umbrella's all about, and that's like the core fucking thing. No matter what, Umbrella's always there to fuck over the main characters because they just want profits. You know, people don't criticize the Fallout TV show for having the exact same fucking premise, but they criticize the Resident Evil movies just because they're dumb action films. Wow. Which high horse do you have to get off to realize that everything's the fucking same? Anyway, that's my elongated look at every single Paul W.S. Anderson film. I hope you guys have enjoyed, because I know I've had a fucking riot going through all these movies, especially the ones I haven't seen yet, and also the ones I had seen, because fuck it, why not? So, thanks for watching. See you kids next time. I'm going to rest now, because I'm dying. Bye. I'm not actually dying, but bye.